In India, there has not been a kind of politics of the lowest strata, whether it is caste or class. Okay, will have to create something like what we call a socialist system. So that's the only way that the human race will survive, this planet will survive. Caste knows only splitting, like amoeba. Amoeba splits like thing, no? So there is no end to it. So that way caste, the feature of caste is that. And class tends to unite on a your parameters of life, actual life. Class tends to unite.
Hi, welcome to Outlook Talks. We are with Anand Teltumbde, and he needs no introduction. He is an author, activist, columnist, many other things. And we are at his house, which is Rajgruha, and in Dadar Hindu Colony. And he has written a fantastic piece for our Freedom special edition, which talks about Isaiah Berlin's negative and positive concepts of liberty. And in that, the piece is called Freedom of Fantasy. And he starts with the time when we gained independence. And we thought we would talk to him about his work, his time. He was also arrested in Bhima-Koregaon case, spent time in jail, and then got bail in 2022 later. And then he has been here since then. We met him I think last year we met him, and he wrote a column for that Independence Day issue. And this is the new one now. So Teltumbde ji, so I just wanted to ask you about, this is very intriguing when you talk about the persistence of caste, that you say that it has basically feudalism, it has basically outrun everything. तो मतलब वो रह गया है. So why you think so, and what can be done? And why we don't understand caste?
Even why caste survived.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shouldn't, no?
Yeah, there is so much of a confusion, but people do not see when the transition happened, because the caste has been fossilized thing and characterized India for almost about 1,000 years. Not that rhetorically thousands of years, etc. I would call it's almost 1,000 years. But in medieval times, the changes started happening. Okay, in micro terms, the changes were happening always, but as compared to the rest of the world, the changes were very minimal. And from medieval times, when the alternate civilization actually entered India, Islamic civilization, so lot of lower caste people had an opportunity to escape the caste bond. They were otherwise confined to villages, and they started getting migrated, and the advanced feudalism that actually came in the wake of Islamic civilization with the Islamic rulers, brought. So they started building cities, markets, new revenue systems, and transportation, etc. So these projects required artisans, a lot of artisans and the laboring classes.
And workers.
So the lower kind of OBCs that we call them today were the artisan classes. So they migrated alongside the laboring classes, which actually constituted the most populous castes of SCs, scheduled caste, also migrated, Dalits, right? So in course of time, not that they were Islamicized immediately, etc. And in course of time, they found that Islam being very egalitarian and all that, they accepted, they embraced Islam. And the same kind of influence probably is seen among the rest of them when Sufis came here. So a lot of lower caste people, Sufism or rather propagated Islam among the low caste in a very big way, much more than direct Islamicization. So this process was the first dent. It was a sort of democratic change that befell the caste India. So a lot of people, somebody like Vivekananda says that it was not by sword but by volition that people became Muslims.
Exactly.
Okay. and something like a 20% Hindus were lost to Hinduism with this process. So this way, then thereafter came the British colonialism, many European colonialism, many French, Dutch, etc. had small pockets. Ultimately, British prevailed, and British colonialism stabilized. So again, the similar kind of process, but much more in much more pronounced form
started happening
because British were did not contemplate to settle here, and they were the non-resident kind of Indians, and they did not have initially much to do with all these kinds of nonsense. They just dismissed it. So Dalit, for instance, got a huge opportunity. You would find that initially East India Company, much of the recruits, there were a lot of Rajas and Maharajas and
all kinds of
all over, and they had the so-called warrior caste in their armies. Now, who were left out, and who meaning would go to British army? So British opened their army to
all kinds of
the
people.
untouchables, and a lot of Namashudras in Bengal, and thereafter you find that Mahars from
that's what the
Mahars,
Bima-Koregaon,
Parayas in Madras, all these kinds of people had huge opportunity in army. It is not incidental that many of the leaders of the Dalit movement, they come from this populous caste of the scheduled caste, and their background, if you probe, the background actually happens to be military, army. Ambedkar is the best example, but MC Raja, then even Achyutanand and many others actually had this lineage of British military service. So this, and even more people were recruited, in British households as servants, in their clubs, etc. So they had got an interface with something like not only alternate civilization, but the liberal kind of European outlook, and they got in process. The best example probably I can cite, to make it short, Shivram Janba Kamble from Pune. He was a butler. Okay, his father was butler. He was also butler in a British club, and he is the person who Bhima-Koregaon, Ambedkar gets associated, but he is the person who brought Ambedkar there, because Ambedkar became it. So this is the fun, people don't understand anything. So it is his movement. Basically, the movement was when British stopped recruitment of Mahars in military, so there was a lot of turmoil. And some people, most of the people in Maharashtra at least, the movement started with that kind of demand that the recruitment should be restored. Okay, Shivram Janba Kamble was one of the most prominent one rather in that. And then he created that kind of myth that Mahars were very brave soldiers and they defeated.
And that was the myth that was celebrated also.
They defeated Pesho army and Brahmanism, that kind of thing that rather he initiated. And in 1927, they used to congregate there in a small way, and Ambedkar, when he returned from Europe, with a lot of scholarly accomplishments, etc. So he became quite a name. So he invited him to preside over one of the meetings. So that is what it is. Not Ambedkar who initiated, and Ambedkar probably had never gone thereafter on his own. So this is the kind of ignorance that prevails around. So what we're talking about is this kind of changes happened. Then the biggest change that came in with education. Education started by missionaries, not the British people, because they were not, as they started stabilizing their rule here, they started jittery about tinkering with the social fabric of India. So they went with a caution. And but missionaries who started coming from Europe and Americas here, they began a lot of work in education field, and they opened doors of education to Dalit. Let me add that even the East India military service also had the tradition of educating their people. In their families. So that also influenced. Ambedkar's making actually could be traced to that. Because Ambedkar's father, those days, something like our grandfather or great-grandfather, he spoke very fluent English and he had such a mastery on English, etc., and reached something like the topmost post that in India could hold in a military establishment. So these are phenomenal kinds of things that happen. So education brought in big change. Later on, of course, British also adopted reluctantly and let Dalits into the school, and thereafter they just flew off. See something like Ambedkar, etc., comes out as a product of this process. So, and another development that happens is the Dalit movement, in the twilight of 20th century. This also get all lower castes because of this only, basically education and all. Say Mahatma Phule, for instance, is identified the pioneer of non-Brahmin movement. It's because of education and missionary school education that his doors were, meaning his horizons were opened up. And he kind of rebelled against the Sethjis and Bhadjis, which are typically capitalists and feudal landlords. So it's a meaning remarkable person to speak this in those times.
It's
very, very radical.
Very,
very radical.
It's
and we probably strategically cannot be faulted even today. So all these kinds of things dictate caste, but how caste were accommodated in when the entire freedom movement, that means the parlays from early 20th century, Morlemento reforms, Montesquieu reforms, all those kinds of reforms.
And you talk about that fact that it got transferred from British capitalists to basically Indian capitalists. And what did that do? Because a lot of people make this argument consistently, and I've spoken to some people over this informal chats, saying and they believe in capitalism, and I was intrigued also because I didn't understand much of it. Because I was coming to Bombay, and every neighborhood ke outside there's an Ambedkar Nagar, and so there is a caste situation. So my question is that why people fail to see that? Like as an outsider, I was able to see it, and people in Bombay were like, no, there's a lot of development, and people have better chances, and kind of like all of this free, like the untouchability thing is not practiced as in cities. Like, but to me, Bombay remains very casteist in a way, because I see it, like, I'm coming from Bihar or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answers, but maybe you would be able
more casteist than Bihar.
I feel so sometimes. I mean, I don't know, because this argument that slums में हर तरह के लोग रह रहे हैं, ऐसा नहीं है.
I also lived in Bihar. I have an advantage. I don't claim always, but I lived almost everywhere.
I mean, Bihar is casteist. I mean, that to
that's rhetoric, but that does not mean that other people are not casteist.
हमको लोग देख के बोल देते आप तो ऐसा हो. But sure, but Maharashtra, I mean, I'm sorry, but even not Maharashtra, Bombay itself, there are so many things there. Like, Muslims will not get this apartment, लहसुन प्याज नहीं बना सकते, ये नहीं कर सकते.
Yeah, you will find easy ghettoization in Bombay.
Completely.
That Dalits are, there are Dalit bastis intact.
No, but that even people say that नहीं उसमें तो that's poor people. So poor people can't be classified into caste because Brahmin भी slum में रहते हैं. But that's
actually,
not true
caste
either.
and class is so much matched reality that it cannot be separated.
And
that
you
is
have
true.
talked about it a
that
lot.
That is true, and that's why I've been talking about. People take again, that's a stereotype that I talk caste or Ambedkar or anything. I don't have anything to do with that. I actually, my commitment is to the people and this land mass. That what can an individual contribute? You know, if this I can contribute to betterment of this kind of thing, it's enough for me. That's all.
So, if you can explain
that's
a
the
bit
modest
about
end.
that.
But people would actually label me something like some people label me Ambedkarite.
Yeah.
Because of my...
You were labeled as Maoist for...
because of a caste or something. Some people in the very extreme, then they will label me Maoist, Marxist, all kinds of labels. But I have never spoken like that, you know. I myself have never identified with any ism.
In fact, you have also challenged Ambedkar in a couple of your pieces, at least what you have written for us.
Yeah, actually before my marriage, I was not known because my name is not typical Mahar or anything.
Yeah.
So it's only people started identifying my company also.
Yeah.
We never used caste certificate, for instance. Okay, so so there was no occasion for something like this thing. Even in my closest friend circle in colleges, etc., they did not identify me with Dalit. Genuinely did not know that I was Dalit.
Yeah, exactly.
So that ran, but then anyway, I don't feel ashamed or bad about it, and I rather found.
Yeah, but why do people feel ashamed about it even now? Like why? Because we have interacted with several of these artists, and one of them said that, look, I don't want to say. So I said, but your work is on that.
What?
Caste. She's an artist from Bihar, and she's from if I'm not wrong, the Chamar caste, Jata, which is called Jata, but Bihar mein to abhi bhi wahi bolte hain. Her father was actually one of the activists, but she became bigger and bigger with her work, and then we wrote a piece about her, and she said, please take down that thing. And I'm like, but your work is coming from there, like you're addressing caste in your work, so how do we, anyways, we pulled it down. But that is one thing I never understood. Why is it like still, and I'm sure...
Why he was shying of using
that,
caste or identity. Yeah, if people advance in that, no, so that brings in, this is psychology, brings in lots of handicap, you know, the people's outlook changes once this thing. I didn't care because I had so much moss around me that I really did not affect me anyway. So you call me Bhangi, you call me anything, it doesn't really matter. Because people did know I had what to call, something like scholastic achievements, etc. in my background, that could never be dented. So it's a confidence, self-confidence.
Yeah,
so
but the confidence has to also come from somewhere.
So many people change their names. Mine is probably the dirtiest name possible, but I did not change because of that. That, okay, I will carry this name and still show that I am somebody.
Yeah, because if the upper caste use their surname,
it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't. So and also about class and class, because
but
that's
in normal, see, this is in normal case, it becomes very difficult to carry on with a tag of something like an untouchable or this thing. So that you should make a concession to people who actually are shy of using it or feel bad
I understood in a way, but I didn't understand in many ways.
That's not a big deal. It's in process. So I'm not making any capital out of it.
No, that's true. And also about class and caste that you were talking about, because see, it seems like not many people are understanding that it's interrelated. And even though we understand, like, why are most poor people coming from the lower caste? So if you can talk a little bit about that, because you have been talking about that. And
look, from earlier times, the caste was a reality, but even reality in what sense? So people did not know about the caste because it was a birthmark with which actually you lived in the world. And you lived, you are born and died in the same kind of caste. So caste was a reality, a dominant reality. That did not mean that class was not there, because associated class features also were there.
Completely.
So when Ambedkar speaks of caste being enclosed class, it's true. Class, Ambedkar does not use a Marxian class sense.
No, not at all.
It's a Weberian, very vague kind of thing. That is that apart. But class, you cannot dismiss class. Now, for instance, there was one scholar, he was very scholarly person, and he was an activist also, Sharat Patil. You might have known him. So he theorized that India had only caste up to British times, and thereafter it started changing. So they so his steroid, etc., but that would be lengthy affair. So let's not enter that field. Now, distinctly from colonial times, this classization of caste started happening. What is the implication of that? So the caste do not remain pure. Now take anything like at the lowest of the lowest caste. Also, you will find somebody somebody doing business and has far more money than an average Indian. So these are the kinds of classes, and these people do not sort of relate with the rest of the masses.
Completely.
So this has happened. This is natural process from actually from the advent of capitalism in India. So this is bound to happen everywhere. So it's not a caste. Now you can't go back to that dictum that was 1,000 years ago. The problem that I face is that people normally use the same kind of thing. They started off from we stereotype like thousands of years we were exploited, and that Manu and that all, it starts from there only. They do not contend the contemporary reality. Contemporary reality is hopelessly mixed with caste and class. So that they do not identify and rather try to understand that.
And what is happening now in India, because you say that caste is becoming even more of a force, like, and which we also see, because there are so many conversations about it. And even though people say development and this and that, and then you talked about that as well, like how development happens and some of it percolates to some of them, but it's not really the solution. So how do you firstly understand caste and then class, and why is it persisting like so much? And in the reign of like this Hindutva situation happening, there's so much of other stuff. Caste just doesn't
see the advantage,
with the caste census now.
Advantage of talking class is one that it unifies. And in contrast, caste actually fragments.
Completely.
Okay. The caste, in simple terms, you can say that it does not know unification. It splits like amoeba.
Completely.
So there is no end
but
of.
Why so? Why wouldn't caste?
Caste splits like any amoeba. Why? You don't understand?
No, that's what I came to you to understand, because I would think that lower caste would unite and kind of like address.
See, caste is the continuum of hierarchy. Now where do you draw line in a continuum? Okay, so that is why it splits. Okay, like take for instance Mahar here. So Mahar has something like some people say there are 12 and a half subcaste.
हमारे में भी है.
हाँ सभी में है. मैं एक एग्जांपल दे रहा हूँ. मुझे भी मालूम नहीं था काफ़ी हद तक, but जब actually when I started writing and all this thing, this is not my subject, but from activism I graduated to writing also simultaneously. Activism was I was writing, but not in my name. So continuously but you think, and then I started, but lot of such ignorance came out because somehow I did not know that there were subcaste of Mahars, etc. Because some way from it's an accident that right from the childhood I did not so much what to call relate with caste. Okay.
Which is experience.
So my outlook has been elsewhere. I had written also that my influences were in the sixth, meaning when I was just 8 years old, I think I got Stalin's book. So Stalin's book, or later on something like Bhagat Singh's book. These were my influences. Ambedkar Dahej mein aa gaya tha. Okay. Ambedkar was there, but there was nothing to be read about Ambedkar. It's only loudspeaker pe gaane lagte the.
Exactly. And so some posters you would see sometimes.
So So it was so hazy affair, Right. Ambedkar, we got to read something when I entered university, 11th standard mein. So that's till then the thinking gets quite concretized. So that apart. it's very easy to see, as I said, that caste could be defined as a continuum of hierarchy.
Yeah.
It's not Varna kind of, Varna is a notional kind, but
Yeah.
there are something like 4 definitive Varnas.
Definitive 4 and उसके अंदर हजार और.
हाँ, 4 Varna hai, so they are definitive kind of hierarchies, okay, compartments. But caste, nobody knows how many castes exist.
Many.
There are caste and then the subcaste, and who knows there are no sub-caste. Because it has been evolving also alongside. So you couldn't be sure.
No, not at all.
So that is why caste knows only splitting. Like
never
amoeba.
unifying.
Amoeba splits like thing, na? So there is no end to it. So that way caste, the feature of caste is that. And class tends to unite on your parameters of life, actual life. Class tends to unite. So that's the advantage.
So why is nobody addressing class?
Huh?
Here, like let's say politics, for instance. You would have caste, and normally you would think because of like whatever has happened in the past, most of the lower caste or like Dalit people might end up poor, which is also true, by the way. So it's intrinsically related as well, caste and class here in that sense. But politics, why nobody is addressing in like class rather than just caste? I don't know. I mean, I want to see like, what you have to say.
Politics is not.
But what would be? How would you solve this? Because it seems like it's unsolvable or whatever. I don't know.
See, there is in India, there has not been a kind of politics of the lowest strata. Whether it is caste or class. Okay. During making of the Dalit movement, that politics was something like talking about anti-caste tone, etc., etc. But unfortunately, that also did not take comprehensive account of that their reality and looked at the class issues, because it germinated very much in during colonial times, and these things were to be seen there. But it went on along, it drifted away along the mainstream politics. Only thing, it kept a parallel stream. Okay. So there are pluses and minuses in terms of strategies. So as a result, and talking about the so-called class movements, like communist movement. So initially, they were taking things from outside, that again was a romanticism.
Completely.
But there were few spots which actually kind of indigenously created, like Telangana movement, Tebaga movement, the movements in
even Jharkhand,
Tamil Nadu. So everywhere some pockets of communists and local communists without any truck with the central leadership actually articulated the struggles, and they actually flowed also into quite a promising ones, like Telangana, for instance, had a big promise. But thereafter, again, after demise of Telangana, then the communist movement also took a parliamentary path. Earlier times also, during movement, they were dilly-dallying about taking stand, taking instructions from Moscow. So those kinds of things went on happening, and thereafter, of course, after independence, then almost these all politics of the lower strata almost started disappearing.
Completely. But why did that happen? Why did the left kind of become so weak in that sense? And what are the reasons for it?
Again, in my analysis, it's very complex. It becomes simplistic to speak in few words or sentences, but I have written my kind of thinking about why, because I feel most sad speaking about the left. Something like I would rhetorically speak that today's situation is because of the failure of left. And talking in the context of India, the failure of left can be pinpointed that related to caste, understanding caste. Okay, they could not understand properly what this animal is. For quite some time, they started sort of using there's model, structure and superstructure. So caste relegated to superstructure. When the revolution happens, all these nonsense would disappear. Okay, that kind of thing. And the in implication, they went on undermining the Ambedkar struggle. The Bombay communists, for instance, where Ambedkar was working. So they dismissed it. It's a superstructural struggle. I mean, it's meaningless. Okay, so that kind of attitude they initially had. They should not deny now. And even today, now when they actually recoil back, to the other end, like pendulum, now they start actually floating caste-based, anti-caste organization fronts. Everywhere they exist. Many of them, incidentally, were inaugurated by me personally. So that again is a bad thing. Although whatever little positive happens, you do not dismiss that. Okay, so I took it in positive tone and I associated with. I have intimate contact with such kind of comrades. So, but some way I get a reflection that they still do not have clear moorings as to how to handle this. Either you take an extremist casteist view or take a class view. Now class view is,
or a middle view,
class view is totally out of fashion, up to 70s, 80s, etc. The Marxism was a
thing.
Intellectually valorized. So now it is no more, out of fashion. So the class term is out of question.
What is in fashion now in terms of this?
Now you are getting dragged by the ruling class politics.
Completely.
So there is nothing in fashion, but whatever they said to be a fashion.
No, now it's become very fashionable to say that I am in favor of these things. And
like this is the nice period to understand what is fashion.
Exactly.
Like Modi brings out some issue and everything gets drifted toward that. Then he brings out different one, everything that gets eclipsed.
Exactly.
And something new comes.
Completely. So and people just stopped. Media obviously.
So that's the fashion.
Is,
so you can you can generate new fashion trends and people
we are still
follow.
Stuck in the old models. We are still stuck in
so
understanding.
You do not have your own things to do. You get drifted and sort of follow Modi.
And if you don't follow, then you have to carve out your own kind of, like, it's damn complex. The other thing I wanted to ask was, I read this book, and obviously I knew about Bhima-Koregaon, but this is another reflection on education and information that we really don't know about many things. And when the thing happened, like 2018, we got to know a little bit, but we had no idea about the history and the Maratha and all of these kinds of things, which I read, and I was actually really scared when I was reading the bit about the surveillance, like how they're putting the malware and whatever, all kinds of things, and it makes you almost like very scared of like being whoever you are, if not in a corporate job or something where you probably are not speaking anything, but even one line that you speak could have consequences, or I don't even know if even if you don't speak could have consequences. But I just wanted to ask you about your time, because last time when we met you did talk about your prison time. And how is a prison, prison you were there in Taloja, and is there class and caste in prison as well, and how does it work, and what did you do there? And you did say that it was a fabricated case, but you did spend considerable amount of time in jail, and
it's fabricated that now people are writing about everything is open and shut now before public. But how much it is consequential, one has to. We are not supposed to be speaking on that case per se, so I avoid that because I have a lot of data, and probably the truth will come when I write it down, when the case ends that time, and one does not know, maybe posthumous. Okay. So that apart, but the essence of it is not confined to Bhima-Koregaon even. You leave apart our case. Okay. The essence is that they are creating an infrastructure wherein something like they can pick you up just like that and put in jail. Okay. and incarcerate you for years. Now there are people, now recently in Manish Sisodia's case, the Supreme Court fortunately reiterated the old rule, Krishna Iyer's time and much before, that bail is the rule and jail is an exception.
Exactly.
Okay, nothing very radical. It is just a reiteration of that
jurisprudence. Or what happened? Of what they said before.
They established jurisprudence. But no, judges also started speaking. No, bail is
the
rule, and jail is jail is the rule. Jail is the rule, and bail is an exception. So it's fortunately, this very recent judgment very vocally said so that if the trial is not going to end, bail should be given. Okay, at least that much I sense. You see, with not knowing anything law, that's none of a business. But law is just, I found with my interaction or confrontation with law, the way it happens, it's nothing beyond logic. Okay, very funnily, this entire breed of lawyers and judges are not formally taught logic. I was surprised. Actually, I learned logic.
And what is logic?
Very formally. Very formally. There's a subject called logic, you know. So you formally learn that, it's trained. Otherwise, so if there is no salience, they would not teach such kind of things in universities. No? I was surprised that they do not have logic in their curriculum. Anyway, that so that is not the subject. This,
no, but that's interesting that you say that there is no logic, because most of the time.
No, I find I was in jail. I was reading the judgments. You know, so many judgments. One of my neighbors was focusing on, and he used to, because he started. He prodded me rather to be co-author with him to write a book on UAPA. Okay.
Gautam Nandlakha?
No, not that. I will not name him.
Okay, great.
He's a poisonous person. Jail, you have lots of all kinds of people, but many such kind of stalwarts became friendly with me. Okay. So
I know you talked about reading books, and there was this one guy who used to come and he would listen to you, and all kinds of friendships were formed. So
no, there were many such friends. The way I was put in jail, in the hospital barrack. So such people were housed, so-called elite kind of thing, and they had this kind of background. Somewhere serial killers, somewhere somewhere gangsters, somewhere a rabid Hindutva fellow who had some murders of Muslim to his credit, and some policemen, you know, ab tak chappan wala,
all kinds of people.
All kinds of people, and they were friendly, you know. Within that jail setting, you have to forget those kinds of things, what they
have done in their previous
outside.
Life.
And khana pina, ye was sab chalta hai. So with that kind of thing, I got to read a lot of judgment. Before that, it was something like Hebrew to me. It was alienating to read their language also, and all. So, but I started reading, and I found in a single judgment what the judge says in the first part, and several hundred pages, he actually goes on contradicting and comes out the third conclusion as an order. Most of the judgments are written like that, and we take as a sacrosanct.
Exactly.
Okay, and this is within one single judgment.
So and
there could be across the judgment, if you find, there would be so many contradictions. So it's a contradiction galore. But people suffer. They are not aware of that kind of thing, that they are playing with the lives of people.
Exactly.
So this happens, you know. So.
No, that is because you also talked about the constitution and the limitations within the constitution and the limitation in terms of truncated freedoms and how we have these freedoms, right? But there is also that whole thing that your freedom ends where we addressed it in this issue as well, that about this limitation, and some people have written about it. But I just wanted to know that why, because we have always taken the constitution as this, this red book has been flaunted everywhere now in this election, and obviously where do you go? I mean, you have the constitution and that's your thing, but within that also, because that's why all of these things are also happening in the sense, I don't know, I mean, I wanted to ask you as to how do you look at it and what can be done, or if anything can be done.
No, our constitution is respected and it is respectable, no doubt. Because it's very big.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of such masala, like fundamental rights to all people, and
preamble and directive principles
and elaborate kind of social justice schema that the liberals see it in. So because of that, constitution becomes a very good thing. But in essence, constitution, there is another way of looking at the constitution, and that should not be forgotten. Constitution is a rehash in a way of 1935 India Act. Okay, and Baba Sahib Ambedkar, who chaired the drafting committee, admitted it. So there is nothing like we cannot discover new thing. What is wrong in copying something which is worked? And what worked was the India Act 1935. So he adopted. So essentially, many things actually verbatim were taken from India Act 1935. And anyway, some earlier constitution like Motilal Nehru, Congress resolutions, etc., so that were picked up. And then fundamental rights. Fundamental rights also, as I probably wrote in that Outlook thing, that it could be said, because UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it came in 1948 when Constituent Assembly was in session. And even in draft constitution, many of these fundamental rights appeared, which predates 1948. That's why I said that it is not as much 1948 UDHR, but it actually was inspired by our own ethos. That's true. And they were elaborately drawn. But let me ask another question to those constitutionalists, that which new sort of post-colonial country does not have this? Essentially all countries constitution read similar. So this is what it is. So this had happened, and the character of the ruling classes also were similar across the country.
Completely everywhere,
they were all
you read
similar.
Any fiction from anywhere in the world.
They talk so much about people, etc. But actually the bottom line was anti-people. So in our constitution also similar thing happened. So all our fundamental rights have a leaking point, exception route, escape route. And none other than Ambedkar proudly declared that no, we have
checks and balances.
No, not check and balances. So for instance, liberty and this and that, but we have given it in one hand and taken out in another hand. There is a exception for every fundamental right.
And those are the exceptions we are seeing being used.
So, and what he said is, he justified it. Somebody raised the question in Constituent Assembly that US fundamental rights are absolute.
Absolute,
So, Ambedkar said they are also not absolute, because when it went to Supreme Court, the Supreme Court evoked the state has a police power. And that police power prevails. So that police power, so-called, actually deletes that absolutism of fundamental rights in US Constitution. According to me, I played with those words itself and said that that's a lame excuse. Because, okay, at least US Constitution had to be challenged in Supreme Court. Let Supreme Court took up take that Supreme Court, and what is Supreme Court? It's not God.
No, of course not. Yeah.
So that took a view of that kind. So it's okay.
There are viewpoints
so
and could be
here
many.
also, if the fundamental rights, if absolute fundamental right came in the way of certain things,
then there would
people could have challenged in our Supreme Court, and our Supreme Court also would have followed the same path and said that no, state has a police power. That is a different thing than incorporating into the constitution itself
the leakages.
Leakages. So these are the kinds of
but why people are not
deficient. That is what I wonder, because it's not my subject. Again, I am not a law expert, and I would never call myself.
No, because it would seem that there's a rhetoric.
This real intellectuals on behalf of people should have found out such kind of lacuna and said so. To whatever consequence, So
because the consequences are for us to see now.
Actually, so because they did not say, we have come to this fore. People blindly keep on sort of
because it gets the crowd, gets the crowd mobilized, and I don't know,
so
it's a certain kind. I mean, we also believe in it so much that
so this kind of intricate arguments would not be would not communicate.
Make for a good speech.
But it's good to sort of churn, the people who are on ground.
Exactly.
They might take the essence to the people. They would be able to communicate through their activism. But if you follow that kind of line at the intellectual level, so that becomes problematic.
Completely. You also talked about you touched upon it briefly about the Congress and all of this, in the sense about capitalism, the industries that were established in terms of public, private, and privatization. You have talked about a lot. The growing capitalism and the kind of capitalism that is coming in, and this privatization of everything now. So the privatization that is happening, right? Why are these models not suited to India? Because they invoke America and meritocracy and all of these things, and then they say reservation nahi hona chahiye, because ultimately progressive hona chahiye sab kuch, taxation bhi aur baki bhi entitles bhi paise ho. So there's a lot of this all noise coming in from different areas. How do you sift through that noise, and what is suitable? There's this privatization they always make, and you have written about this also, the effectiveness of privatization. They keep talking that they are more efficient, and then they'll take some examples here and there and say education did not really work with the government. Healthcare you talked about, it's a nightmare, because for a small thing like a poor family, how can they go to a hospital, because the bills will run into lakhs. So I mean, these are the things that we are looking at. Even school education. In my time, I went to a convent, missionary convent. The fees was just 250 rupees or whatever, something like that. Now the schools, if I had a child, I don't think I would be able to afford any education for that child, because there's like point system in Delhi. There's all these kinds of demarcations. I'm very afraid to fall sick, because I don't know how much money it will cost for you to. And this I saw in America. I studied in America for a bit, and there were so many people who were out of jobs, right? So they would just die because they don't have insurance. It's so sad when you look at, even the schooling system. There's this book I read by Jonathan Kozol, who talks about the inequality. So you tie the property tax to a certain district, and obviously the well-to-do districts will always have better schools, better opportunities, and a poor district, which quote-unquote have criminals who quote-unquote are black people because of certain histories or whatever oppression, then the school system will fail. So you see that the cycle is endless. Well, how does it...
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's so hopeless sometimes that you, like how you said, you felt sad.
Now of course that talking about socialism as an antidote to capitalism, etc. is something like light years away. So let's not get into that.
No, but then what is this privatization?
But actually, very indirectly, without uttering those words, the world is showing it very, very clear manner. That the planet cannot survive without socialism. Without social society becomes socialist. Then only the human race should survive. Okay, this is very coming very clearly when socialism is out of fashion, is something like a derogative term.
Yeah.
All those kinds of things whatever happen. So see I mean, let me explain. Now, those people who say, and the dictum is that private is very efficient and all, it's all absolute nonsense. I have written in a very respected journals also explaining this.
Okay, I read,
by training, I'm a management person.
Yeah.
Okay? And I can challenge anyone in my discipline.
Yeah.
And not only theoretically, I have managed company. Okay, I was CEO of a company.
Oh, so, you were the CEO.
So there should not be any doubt about it in anybody's mind. Yeah. So I feel amused sometimes. So all these kinds of half-baked idiots writing about
like even espousing this whole thing.
Private is efficient, etc. It's nothing like. Okay, it all depends upon how you configure, how you structure your processes. Okay, in a public sector also you could outcompete. I kept on saying something like when Reliance was coming in oil industry, most of my career went in oil industry. So in management meetings I used to challenge that if we actually do this kinds of things, gear up ourselves, nobody, not only Reliance, etc., but not even the multinational can enter this country. Okay, this is a huge opportunity for us, but the entire process would be so structured that only competent people only would rise and they would say yes sir. Yes sir is the dictum. You have to say yes sir to the boss, and it ultimately goes this yes sir series of yes sir and end somewhere in a single person. Single person everywhere. That's what this thing. So let's not take that kind of thing. That's an absolute lie. Constructed by theoreticians of Austrian schools, etc., that private is efficient.
But where are we heading with all this? It's so so if you look at, we covered a lot of the Adivasi issues, in Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, and firstly the religion sarna, appropriation, all kinds of things are happening. But it's terrible in the way that firstly we also did not know the Adivasi situation because we were never taught about that. Firstly, school books se hi shuru ho raha hai. So we had no idea that this also happened and this also existed, and we found out only recently. You knew that there are indigenous people, but you didn't know the entire, not the entire, even basics, right? Like what they were fighting about, what their problems were, and that also creates this situation of no empathy, right? If I don't know you, how will I feel for you? And that is creating a lot of these kinds of issues, and obviously media itself is to be blamed in a lot of ways because we also come from different backgrounds and we don't understand this until you make the effort to unlearn and then kind of learn again. But Absolutely. Who would do that? But where are we heading? Like with all this confusion and all this persistence of caste, and now I would say even the Adivasi, nobody was talking about it. Maybe people were, but they were never given the mic. So
now while we were talking about capitalism, now it's not a capitalism of Marxist time.
Exactly.
Okay, it evolved into something like ended up, and that is also crisis impelled kind of capitalism, which actually took a form of neoliberal capitalism. And even now, obviously capitalism can never sustain. It doesn't have inherent strength to sustain itself.
But it is sustained.
So that's what. So it has come to neoliberalism, which is rather to be read as a failure of the capitalist model. So that it comes to neoliberalism. Neoliberalism again is a failed thing. Okay. So now it comes to something like now taking kind of support of fascist rulers, So all over the world, the capitalism this neoliberal is a theoretical kind of thing I am speaking about. The neoliberalism also failed and it degenerated into something like a fascist systems. Okay, only fascist system can sustain whatever that remains of capitalism. So entire world you will see, right from America down to Bangladesh or anywhere, the same kind of systems will be there. All fascist regimes are cropping up to just sustain,
but why
suppress
do aspire
people,
to
suppress
capitalism?
people, and kind of give fillip to capital. So in this process, the cronies are developed. Okay, this again cronism is a byproduct of this process.
And it's everywhere, even
so
in socialism.
It's not something like Ambani, Adani's exist only in India. Everywhere it is the same. So this is the process needs to be understood properly, and probably not fully yet understood. But broadly speaking, this can be put like this, that capitalism does not have a strength to sustain itself. It's not a sustainable system at all. So because it depends upon profit. Okay, profit is the thing. So profit is nothing but something like sucking something,
Exploitative.
So where does it suck it from ultimately? If you model the world, then the things would be clear, So that picture, in a model term, would be clear that it cannot suck endlessly.
Because clearly capitalism doesn't teach you how to love, and maybe the other models might teach you how to. I don't know if you have the James Baldwin thing of politics of love, and I think that's something which is lacking completely now.
People will have to create something like what we call a socialist system. So that's the only way that the human race will survive, this planet will survive. Otherwise, this accumulation drive, which
but we did have Fabian socialism.
Accumulation drive is the intrinsic to capitalism.
Completely.
And it does not have end, there is no limit. It does not. No limit.
No limit. And India also had this Fabian socialism model that they.
So this climate change, so many kind of crises that are befalling the planet itself
manifestations of that
are the products of this process.
Is there any hope for people who are like, we were talking about all these other people, like how people are still in jail, even in Bhima-Koregaon where you were there. I mean, is there any hope for the poor? Like, let's say somebody who's earning 16,000 rupees per month. How do they save? How do they even get?
It is coming to something like distributing free rations to them. What is free ration to 83 crores of people? So this is not.
So people are just going to die like that.
It's not a freebies. It's not a freebies. It's a systematic kind of strategy to deal with the situation, because situation will come to that so the multitude of masses will not have any wherewithal even to survive.
But even now they don't have.
But these are but problem is that how do you manage these people? These idiots, ultimately are nuisance. So just feed them like pigs, like pigsties, and keep them just like that.
So but where will they live? Where will they access
everywhere?
Healthcare?
No, they would not realize that essential things are, and they would look upward. No, that okay, मेरे भी दिन आएंगे, हर कुत्ते के दिन आते हैं, तो मेरे भी दिन आएंगे.
No, not just that. See, I'm also seeing like, let's say people in our organization, right? Journalism is not a very well-paying job, any which ways. Also dangerous in some ways if you are like trying to do.
Now outsourcing.
How do you save for
outsourcing, contractualizing. I don't mean any setting you can realize if you look at the reality. Then you unless you are on roll of a company or somewhere, you get reasonably paid. But what about others? Because from our times, this now almost 80, more than 50% people are just on outsourced contracted.
It's terrible.
Kind of labor, and they get pittance, for the same salary that we used to pay 10 times regular salary to these kinds of work.
In fact,
so it doesn't have any relation with the kind of work people do and remuneration they get.
Not at all, not at all. And then you're also looked down upon for being a certain kind of worker.
This is what gets valorized in neoliberal thing, because that's a market,
Yeah, because I remember growing up, we didn't see so much. And now we see that. I feel worried about, let's say, some of our people who, even if you earn 1 lakh rupees a month, you cannot save. How do you save? And then if you don't save, where do you end up?
You cannot have something like go to Bridge Candy or the Reliance Hospital, just executive checkup, For us, it is this thing. It's 40,000 rupees.
Completely. No, even like Lal
they
Path
do not
Lab
do.
will cost
They do not
like
do
5, 6,
anything.
like let's say a driver who earns 16,000 rupees, he cannot even go for a full body checkup. And this is not, but then the thing is, then they'll say, is it the responsibility of the state?
The Oxfam stat, if I recall right, 63% people are driven to poverty because of the healthcare
exactly.
default.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all these things, I had written also somewhere that if Ambedkar had concentrated only on 3-4 things, the constitution could have been just 5-6 pages, and that would have worked much better for the majority of people. But they have, all these people have taken a statist stand, as if state is a soft toy, the nation is a soft toy to be stolen by someone. आज का security, national security, etc. is all humbug. There's not like earlier time that you come with guns or swords on horses. And the kind of digital processes that go on, like the finance flows, etc. There lies country's independence, whether it is getting eroded or not. There lies the nationality, and these people are playing with that. But just because it is not visible, we do not understand. The country is getting sold. Public debt, for instance, is getting accumulated. This man has accumulated more than 3 times, during the last 10 years. Now, what existed for 70 years? But how do people understand?
Even I don't know. PhDs
of economics, PhDs also do not understand these processes.
Because I think the daily drudgery has become so much.
Macroeconomic structures of a country, etc. This is not easily understood. The ruling classes play with that.
Completely. And my last thing is, there's
what is national security? What is this thing? They are endangering their national security more than anybody else.
Exactly.
Terrorism, for instance, is a bloody business. It's not
and everywhere in the world.
Nobody has any time or resource to be terrorist. I really do not believe in any story of terrorism.
No, it's, I see people and I feel like really sad.
It's all politically concocted.
Because it's so difficult to look at the reality that is happening in front of you.
Nothing.
And so what about, like, my last question is, Mandal and Kamandal people keep talking about it. We seem to be stuck between the two. Or, like, I don't know what it is. So, have you thought about...
Which one?
Mandal and Kamandal. This is...
Oh, that is old story now.
Like the religion thing and the caste.
Much beyond now, Mandal, Kamandal.
And they keep talking about the caste census.
See, that Mandal, Kamandal, I think I wrote a lot about that in Republic of Caste. I explained in context of reservation. So that was a mischief again, that these ruling classes, even those times very well-sounding founding fathers, etc., we call them, also were not out of this power game. So they wanted, India is endowed with 2 things to manage masses, divide masses, keep people divided. Caste is the most unique thing that India has ruling classes endowment. And second thing is religion. It's a sizable kinds of minorities some way formed in India, and these 2 things came very handy for them, and they would never let
it go
of them. So they devised, now it's a long process, I would not elaborate, but the elaboration of reservation scheduled caste, because this came in colonial times. It's not an independent India has given it. It came in with Independent Act 1935. Schedule was prepared. That schedule did not have a clause that it would be opened up, because the schedule was prepared. So an independent India, when they adopted, because nobody could have not adopted it, in that situation. So they purpose adopted it, but created a mischief that president can add or delete caste.
And that's
so that frozen schedule, which could have been a kind of class, unbeknownst to even the creators, They also did not imagine, British colonial fellows perhaps, that they unknowingly created a class, okay, and snapped that umbilical cord with the Hindu caste system,
completely,
which is a so radical a step that the annihilation of caste was just a couple of feet away.
And then it never happened.
The independence and constitution makers actually squandered it. And they opened up the schedule and created space for politics.
Completely.
Okay. They extended this reservation. Reservation could be an exceptional policy for exceptional people. It is a multi-edged sword. So that again, by extending it to scheduled tribes, that was the extension. I'm never meaning that they should not be getting some such state support, etc. But reservation is not only meaning something like a only tool to do such help people.
Not at all.
There are n number of ways of doing things. And thereafter they extended it to backward castes. The backward caste, whose definition also they did not know. Socially and educationally backward. In a country like India, such a backward country, every caste has that kind of section.
Completely.
What do you do with that?
How do you address that then?
So how do you deal with this backwardness? The backwardness paradigm. Again, the Supreme Court talks about that in this subclassification. It's a nonsense. Because backwardness was not a issue in scheduled caste reservation. It's only untouchability. Sole criteria was untouchability, because with that kind of thing, they, howsoever they were meritorious, howsoever they were rich, this society would not acknowledge it and give them their dues. So there had to be something like a countervailing force of the state
to
counter it, counter the societal prejudice. That is the only premise behind this reservation. Now these people actually extend it to backwardness, equality, all that kind of nonsense. This inequality in India is now at the zenith. Okay, it never existed in India's history. And they are not bothered about that. They are bothered about inequality among SCs. What a joke.
It is actually.
And Supreme Court speaks like that. And it takes well raised and interprets it the way it likes.
It's actually really strange, because then you have the denotified tribe. We in fact did a story on that also. And what are they struggling with? Like criminal tag from God knows when. And they whatever they are doing, they're being lynched, whatever. I mean, it's just a country
they just created confluence, the people would only get confused.
Completely.
Nothing. Like criminal tribes exist today also. Nothing has gone. Everything exists.
No, and as a woman, like people say that, okay, I'm educated, I'm doing some that, but how am I free? Like there is a gaze, there is this judgment, there is that judgment, there are all kinds of things happening, and we're not able to see it, or maybe even see it, we're like, okay, chalo, theek hai, koi nahi, kya farak padta hai, it's one lifetime, but actually it's sad. And what are you working on a book, you had said when I called you. When is it coming out?
My first book, post jail term, was scheduled that was the biography. I think I told you earlier that I wrote, before going to jail, biography of Ambedkar. It was a sponsored kind of work. So I thought I had completed it, but then it was not. So the process was paused. After coming back, then I almost rewrote it, which was scheduled to come in April, but some mishap happened in the production process, and now it is coming next month.
And what are you working on now? Any other jail diaries?
Another jail memoir also might be coming next month.
You've written it already?
I have already given it.
Oh wow, that's great.
Now I am working on something like revision of. There are 2-3 books simultaneously. I work on so many things. So whichever completes, I do not know. You
never felt like you should not have left that life to come into this life, like the dreamers of equality, what happened, like Sudha Bharadwaj, I mean, all of that, you went all left. Like your CEO life.
एक ही life में बहुत सारे life हो गए अभी.
Yeah, so many multi-level lives. But CEO life and now this life, where you would still do it, this?
Yeah, no, absolutely no regrets. It's good, actually. This is a good experience to see a world, whatever I was saying or writing bit with rhetoric, etc., has been, we had an opportunity to see it from intimate
vantage points.
Vantage point.
Yeah.
So jail life भी हो गई, अच्छा है.
Thank you so much. It's always so delightful to talk to you, and thank you for having us over.
Yeah.
Thank you.